Kia ora tātai. Ai tika ana te kōrero he uri no te waka o Tainui. Ko nā te raukawa, ko nā te kōrehe. Koe na koroa nei, hoki au e noho ana ki roto i nā iwi o taku hawahine o te rata whakatohia i o Pōtiki. Kei reira taku kāinga, ko te whānāpunu i ko Ngāti Awa hoki. No reira, waku tamariki. Hoi anō, hari ana te ngākau ko taumai nei, te tonua, te tiohene nei ki harama ki te tautoki o kōtau. I tēnei rā, nā kanohi no nā taumu, kanohi te mihi ki o kōtau. Huri no tō tātou whare tēnā kōtau. Just want to endorse the comments. I was just listening. I just got in. So if anyone wants to start a business, there was no taxi out at the airport at Whangarei this morning. So there's a business opportunity there. There are obviously not enough taxis here in Whangarei. So I had to wait for about 25 minutes for a taxi. So I've actually just literally walked in the door. So I'm pleased to see that they've got my PowerPoint up. I just want to endorse those comments though about being locked out. You know, one of the things I'm going to talk about today is just that we've got to keep remembering what kind of era that we're in. Really, there was 100 years from the 1860s to the 1960s where we were locked out of New Zealand society. Our people were living on the pā. You know, 90% of our people were still rural at the end of World War II. Within 20 years, most of us ended up in the cities. It's not that long ago. So, you know, these things take time, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. Okay, I can't see what is behind me, so I'll just quickly go through it. Next slide. Right, okay. The title of my presentation today is about the master's tools. If you ever get a chance, Audre Lorde is a black radical from the States, and she actually coined this phrase about us needing to get rid of the master's tools, basically the tools of the colonizer, and actually start rethinking and developing our own tools. And I think that's a really important message for us going forward, and that's going to be the crux of what I talk about today. Korero mana atu, kia riro mana mai. I actually borrowed from tā kotahi matua, te kotahi mahuta, Bob Mahuta, and one of the things he said which underpinned the Waikato Tainui claim was korero whenua atu, kia riro whenua mai. So I've just adapted that, korero mana atu, kia riro mana mai. And that's also what I want to talk about today, is that we need to reclaim our own mana as much as we can in this changing world that we live in. So that's really an important message for today. Next slide, please. Kay Marie contacted me a couple of weeks ago and asked me for a copy of a paragraph I wrote for a book a couple of years ago. And it was a book being edited by Dr. Rawiri Taunui, and it was about mātauranga Māori. And this is basically a quote from that chapter that I wrote. Unfortunately, for some reason, and maybe we should have gone to a Māori publisher, the publisher pulled the book right at the end. So he actually has a draft book out there somewhere with a whole lot of chapters about health and education, all different writers contributing to the book. And so after Kay Marie's encouragement, I might get back in touch with Rawiri and see if we can actually find somewhere else to get it published, because I think it was an important piece of work, and certainly so does Kay Marie think so. So this is basically what it says, and I mean, it's not maybe radical for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, we need to build our own whare. Ia kia tāwhiao ne, mā kua noe hangi tōku ake whare. So we need to actually develop our own tools, our own house in which to deliver in. Next slide, please. Next slide. And we've made a start, yeah? We made a start back in the 80s with Kohanga Reo and Kura, and then Wānanga. We actually, for the first time, just went out and did it. We didn't wait for permission from Pākehā. We actually just went out and thought up our own things. And the great thing about us being here 40 years on is that we now have data that clearly shows that when we have the opportunity to develop our own tools, like Kohanga and Kura, we get a much better outcome than anything that Pākehā designed for our own people. And we now have data through Te Kupinga, as part of the census data, that Kohanga Reo kids and Kura kids do much better in this world than kids that go through the mainstream. Not a surprise for most of us, I suppose, but it shows that when we have the opportunity and actually do it ourselves, we can do better. Whānau order, the reason we're here today, in the social services space, if you like, but we've still got some big spaces to unlock here. I sat with a doctor from Whangarei Hospital this morning on the plane talking about the fact that in the paper this morning, Labour, Greens and Māori Party have all committed to instituting the Māori Health Authority, which was the recommendation of the Waitangi Tribunal last year. And he said to me, do you think that's going to be the answer? And I said, no, but it's going to be a step towards where we need to get to. It's just one step, because it'll still be part of that bureaucracy. It'll still be part of the hegemony and the language of the coloniser, but it's a step towards us getting what we want, which is us actually having our own money to do our own thing. And I'll explain to him about the Nuka model in Alaska and the fact that there are actually Indigenous models out there now for us to deliver our own health in our way. We can design it. It'll be better. We've just got to find a way to get to that space. Environmental management's the same. We've got a long way to go there, and it's the same in business and in economic development. Two sides of that coin, yeah, business and economic development. We've got to keep rethinking about how we would do it or how our tupuna might do it. It's concerned me. I've been involved with all sorts of different businesses and boards over the years, and it concerns me that there's been a degree of capture amongst some of our corporate Māoris, and some of them are really good friends of mine, but they know the Pākehā system really well, and they know how to run effective Pākehā businesses under those constructs. I think what we need to keep doing as we go, and this is going to be intergenerational change, and it's going to be the young people that are going to actually drive a lot of this change, is actually need new business models out of our heads, out of our hearts. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Whether it's for our people or when I've been working with other Indigenous peoples from around the world, we all want the same thing. Mana Motuhake. Yeah, mana Motuhake. So what does that mean for today here in 2020 going forward, post-COVID and all the rest of it? Next slide, please. This is a slide I threw together a few years ago. I can't remember what I was speaking at, but it kind of dawned on me. That maybe one way of looking at it is that with mana atua, mana whenua, and mana tangata, together with all those things we can achieve mana motuhake. And I'll just expand on that a little bit more with the next slide, please. And in terms of mana motuhake, I think that the most important place to start is with us as individuals, every single one of us here. It's got to be ground up. Our development, we know this has got to be ground up. It can't be top down. It's not going to be that effective when it's the iwi down. It's got to be ground up. We've all got to work together, but mana motuhake, you need to achieve it in your own life first, for yourself as an individual, for your whānau, and then you'll have something to contribute back to your hapu, and then hopefully to your iwi. And hopefully your hapu and iwi are listening to what you say, and you might be able to have some influence at those levels, because some of us have tried and failed over the years, and it's not always easy. But as I say, I think you've got to keep thinking for the future and keep putting your point of view. Mana atua, mana tupuna, obviously reo, whakapapa, all those things that our kids get at kura and at kohanga reo, all the basics that make us what it means to be Māori today. I grew up in, my father's Pākehā, my mother's Māori. My mother grew up in an environment where her parents, my grandparents, never spoke any Māori to them. And their encouragement to my mother and her siblings was to get on in the Pākehā world, because that's where your oranga was. And she sent me off to the University of Waikato. I did a business degree at Waikato with alongside Peter Tepine and Hemiro and a few other naughty people. And what I also got involved with was Te Kapahaka o Te Whare Whānau o Waikato under Timoti Kareti. So I started my journey back then. And I've come away, a fair way. My reo's still a bit tapepe, so my kids keep telling me. But I'm still learning. But I know that at least I've started building a bit of a platform for my kids and for my mokopuna. I've now got a son who I put up front because his whaikōrero is miles ahead of mine now, and I'm happy for him to actually take the lead in those kinds of things, because he is going to be awesome. So we need to open those doors and privilege our kids, because that's what Pākehā is doing all the time. They privilege their kids. Raywin knows this well, the work she's done, trying to privilege our kids. It's not about spoiling them, it's actually about opening doors for them, giving them opportunities so they can succeed in this really crazy world that's really hard on them. So we all need all of these things, yeah? And it's the same whether when we take that to our hapu, when we take that to our iwi. If our iwi and our hapu don't have these things, then they're really not a Māori organisation, I say, okay? And these things should underpin everything that the hapu and the iwi and the whānau are doing. Because that's where the oranga is, it's there. It's not making a whole lot of money. I know this, I've visited tribes in the States who have heaps of money, and they have some of the worst social and health statistics in the world. They write a cheque to their people every year, a big cheque, and it creates all sorts of problems because they haven't done this. Money's not the answer. You can do a lot of stuff with money, and I always think back to when I was on Te Pūtea Whakatui Trust. We ran a series of Māori economic development conferences for our scholarship recipients, and we had one, our first one, we had a Chief Clarence Louis from the Sawyers tribe in British Columbia came and speak, and he said, I love money because it allows me to establish jobs for my people. So it's the means to the end, yeah? And that was his thinking, and I still think just that one lesson, which I've seen with some of the tribes in the North America and some in Australia now, some of the clans in Australia, we still haven't really captured that here. I don't want to pick on anyone, but I think back to the early mistakes of groups like Waikato Tainui. When they decided to get into hotels, I thought, oh, fantastic, someone's thinking about all the jobs they can create. Because the place was full of Pākehās, and I'm talking about Tainui Group Holdings, when they first established those hotels, there was no thought to actually position their own people in those jobs. Hello? Over the years, and it's been over 20 years now for them, they've changed out the Pākehā in their team, and they've changed in the Māoris, and they've developed their capability, their capacity to actually deliver effective economic development outcomes and make money for the tribe, but the thinking has changed. And that's how long it's taken. I mean, 24 years since settlement, that's a generation, yeah? And it's taken them that long to learn that simple, what I would have hoped would have been a simple lesson. Get into businesses that create jobs. They've just sold out a Go Bus. I don't know why that is. You know, all those jobs that they could have been positioning their people into, I don't know what happened there. So I need to talk to my nephew, who has my name, who's a senior manager in Tainui Group Holdings, and see what the hell's going on. Not my tribe. And I'm not criticising, yeah? I'm just saying this is the evolution of learning that we need to, if we're going to get back to this. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we've got to keep remembering, because it's all in our heads. Colonisation is deep in here. And, you know, we often believe these things from time to time, you know. I talk to my wife, she loves going shopping. And I'm not saying that, you know, she's colonised, but, you know, all these material things and all that kind of stuff. Individual benefit versus collective benefit. Our people think differently. So if we take that as a value, some of those values, and we shift that into what we're doing in terms of business and economic development, what can that look like? I mean, these are just ideas. The way in which they're actually embodied and mobilised and operationalised are going to be different for different people. One I really want to just focus on that, I've just touched on it, is the short term versus long term. Uncle Whatarangi Winiata, Ngāti Raukawa, in 1975 established Whakatupurana Ruamano, a 25-year plan for the development of our iwi, Ngāti Raukawa. Fantastic thinking, starting to look ahead. Moana mata, ne? Wāpopo. Now, he's learnt after, that's a couple of generations now through, and he's got a 1,000-year plan that he's thinking through. And we're not the only ones with these kind of values. I managed to meet with some of the people from Nisui, which is the 50% joint venture partner with Māori and Sea Lord. Met with the president in Japan, in Tokyo. They have 1,000 years, and their kids, and inculcate this kind of thinking into your children. One of the things I encourage, I only just started last year, I've been thinking about it for a while. I did a strategic planning session with my kids. And it was one of the funny things, I mean, we've got 6 kids, and in Christmas last year we didn't have any mokos, and the kids wrote up all these goals for themselves, and there was no mokopuna on the goals. So I said to them, where's the mokopuna, you know? And we had our first mokopuna 2 weeks ago. So my new daughter-in-law was saying, see, when you manifest those thoughts, anything can happen. Remember what Einstein said? Imagination is more important than knowledge. You can imagine things and they can happen. Might not be in your lifetime. For some of us, it definitely won't be in our lifetime. But for you young ones, the next generation and your kids, things can be made to happen. Don't necessarily be in much of a rush. Pākehās are always in a rush to make money. Why? Because they want some payback before they die. Well, I'm not in a rush because it doesn't bother me as long as there's some payback for my kids. And they're going to build on the economic projects, and I have my own projects for my own family trust. And the kids know that, and the kids are going to take over some of those things soon, like kiwi fruit and other things. And they'll carry on the idea that through economic development we can actually be better. They have the reo, they went through kohanga and kura, they have all those things, no problem, Pākehā world, Māori world, they're all good, but they're going to carry on with that vision that we can help them set today. Yeah? But you've got to talk about this with your families and your hapu and your marae and your iwi. Next one, please. As I said, it's intergenerational. And so 1996 I just mentioned. But there has been some major shifts, and I'll just quickly get onto those. Last week it was 20 minutes. I understand I've got 15 minutes today, which is why I'm kind of rushing things through here. Next slide, please. So there are some examples. These are just a couple off the top of my head that I know of. If any of you know Paul Morgan, he's driven the Wakatu vision. So Wakatu is an incorporation, but they've developed a strong vision about actually doing their own marketing of their own products into the world. And I remember Paul when he was knocking around Wellington, some might remember, with FOMA and other things, he had the vision back then. I'm talking about the 1990s now, and he's pushed that through. And now he's built fantastic younger people. I have to say, good to see mostly Māori women leading that organisation now. Talented young Māori women. So he's actually built that up and behind them. So they now have his vision, and they're carrying it forward people like Rachel Taylor-Lay and Karenza Johnston. Fantastic vision. It can happen. There's just one Māori trust, an incorporation. A big incorporation, but it's the thinking, it's actually Paul's thinking that's actually taking them to where they are now. Just want to talk a little bit about Taitokerau North number 2. I hope they don't mind. I nearly had the opportunity to work with them earlier this year. This is Ngāhihi Bidwā, and Mana Newton's the new CEO. I think they're actually leading the way. It's an incorporation, but they're really like an iwi because in terms of Ngāti Tauhu, Ngāti Whāwa, just on the edges of Te Arawa and Raukawa, they've really developing themselves as an iwi. So one, it's the only iwi-like organisation I've seen that has everything under a CEO. So they've rethought how it should look. So they're a big incorporation, they have geothermal resources and they're making a lot of money. But they've actually thought, no, we don't want a tribal organisation over here and an economic development organisation over here. We want it all together because we want the thinking and the vision to be the same. So they brought all their Pākehās working in their company, and they're all under one CEO now, and that's Mana Newton. I think that's just fantastic thinking. It's new thinking, partly why? Because it's the Crown that established those structures of post-settlement PGCs, you know, the things after when the iwi are established. And they're the ones that said it needs to be like this and like that. Ngāi Tahu. And I was amazed back then about the amount of money that they invested in Te Reo. Very few iwi have done that, other iwi. Why not? We're saying that now, I sit on Raukawa Settlement Trust in Taitokerau. Why not? Why aren't we investing in Te Reo? When our balance sheet has gotten to a point where we can actually probably sustain quite a significant investment. So these are some examples, again, of changes in thinking, but it takes generations for real change. Next slide, please. We need our young people to come through, and we need to educate the Māori world, Pākehā world. When I was on Te Pū Te Whakatui Trust, we had a scholarship program, and it was targeted at young Māori coming through with the business degrees and science degrees. So it was in line with its Yohu Kaimona requirements or purpose. And we had 50 scholarships of $10,000 each. And this is the hui that we had at Waitangi in 2013. And just some fantastic new people. But our scholarship requirements, we actually highlighted Te Reo and commitment to whānau and marae and iwi. Those were the top criterion. Everything else came afterwards. Fantastic young bunch of people. Immediate network for them, which they're continuing to mobilise. Something that took me decades to build in business, their own Māori network, like-minded people they can bounce ideas off and build off each other, give each other confidence. Next. So I'll just move on to the stuff I've been doing kind of the last 5 or 7 years with Indigenous peoples. I went to the World Indigenous Business Forum in 2012, and in 2015 put up my hand for us to host their conference here in Aotearoa, and we had that in 2018 in Rotorua. And it's been a fantastic journey for me in terms of seeing what's going on in the rest of the Indigenous world. The World Indigenous Business Forum is changing up. You can enrol, it costs you nothing to enrol to the group that's running it now. It's called a World Indigenous Forum, and it's on Facebook. It's all over Facebook. It's next month, and it's free. And these guys are ramping it up to actually involve all the other Indigenous peoples around the world. And the thing about it, there's lots of interesting stuff going on. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, you'll have to just, yeah. Was there one before that? No, that didn't work, okay. So it's carry on, yep. I've managed now to visit some of the tribes, and in particular in the States and in Canada, there's some amazingly successful tribes who have taken this kind of thinking and mobilised it into economic development for their people. And for me, I think they're actually the future. Last year I visited this is the Salt River Lake Pima people in Phoenix, Arizona. And the guy here is Ivan Makel. He was the chief for 10 years. He was the one that set the vision. And now they're a massive organisation. This is the top of their 15-storey casino and hotel. 5-star restaurant at the top, so the meal was very nice. Order salmon, actually, and some New Zealand salve, so that was quite neat. But also in the background of some of their economic development activities, tribe of about 11,000, they're now employing about 13,000 people. So I've met a few of these now. We had Nana Corporation at the Hui in Waitangi that I was talking about before. Another big company, small tribes, less than 10,000 people, they actually employ more people that are in the tribe. So their whole focus has been about building companies that can employ people, and then they train their people for those jobs if they want them. If they want them, yeah? And then helping other people to develop and get other kinds of employment. So I think the future's out there too, but we need to actually reach out and talk to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. They want to know what's going on here. They want to work with us, but they don't know how, and I think that's particularly so for the States. Next slide, please. Nearly there. So this was March this year. This is the first week of March in Las Vegas. And this is the RES conference, which is the National Congress of American Indian Economic Development. And it's the first time they've had an Indigenous person from another country on their stage. And so we'd been negotiating with them for a couple of years, and it's one of the reasons I went to Phoenix last year, because their head office is there. To be there, 3,500 First Nations people, most of the tribes, most of the 660 tribes across the states at the conference. At least I hope now they know who we are, because they don't know much about New Zealand or about Māori. So first step with the Americans anyway, because the Canadians know us well, and obviously the Aboriginals and others, is actually getting some visibility. They have, amongst the tribes, an economy of about 45 billion US turnover, not assets, turnover. And they have real challenges because a lot of that's located in gaming at the moment and casinos. So they need friends so that they can diversify. They need friends so they can export and do those kinds of things they don't do very well yet and don't do much of, even though they have some really big operations. So I think there's some real opportunities for us to talk to them, shared values, shared history. They have a lot to learn from us in terms of te reo and tikanga and all those kinds of things. Some of them. There are some that are really strong, but there are a lot that are actually not that strong at all. And Ivan visited, and we took him to kapaka practice and all that kind of stuff in Opotiki when he was here, and he was blown away with some of that stuff. So building relationships and trying to help them work with us, and that's going to happen right across the Indigenous world. Next one, please. So getting back to the start, I explained to them what the flag was about and shared that with them and gave that to James, the president there of the organisation. And they understood that straight away. I mean, they have a measure of sovereignty with their reservations, but they understand the thinking. They know that. So it's going to be easy to do business with them, I believe. Okay. Next slide. So, key points from today. Set aside the master's tools. Rethink the way you want to do business. Rethink the way you want to do economic development. And I say mana is the fundamental and a potential framework for that, the way in which you do that thinking. Mana atua, mana tupuna, mana whenua, mana tangata. If you can get the right elements across that mix, mana Motuhake will flow, I believe. Real change is intergenerational change. It's not going to happen in a hurry. Some of the First Nations and the states, you might know, they talk about 7 generations. Their cycle they see is a 7-generation cycle. Big changes for them happen in 7 generations. So it's a whole different way of thinking. We've been colonised to think about today, next month, next year, 10 years' time. Not our tupuna, they were thinking, a long way forward. Mātauranga and Mātauranga Māori is critical. We need to keep building that. It's taken me a while to build the little bit that I have. I'm just about to start my PhD actually, with a couple of my cousins, all kind of in our 60s. And it's going to be about Ngāti Te Kore, you know. So we're trying to keep going with this. We want to set an example for our next generation within Ngāti Te Kore. If they can see 3 of us on the stage together getting our PhDs, then we're hoping that will lift them up so that they can all come through and do the same, yeah? In mātauranga Māori in that instance, but also in Te Ao Pākehā. Connect, share and inspire, that was the slide that was missing. So the World Indigenous Business Forum is all about, and network is all about sharing, inspiring, and connecting. And we're doing some stuff still to try and connect Māori businesses here directly through some platforms that they have in the States and other countries, so we can expand our Indigenous business networks. Kei te pai, I hope I was under time. But it's really, he mihi nui ki o koutou whakahaere nei tēnei o ngā mahi. He honore mōku ki hara mai. Nui waku mahi roti ngā tai, ka wane nui e wetei o koutou, he paitone ki hoki mai ki te Taitokerau. The north is a bit like Eastern Bay, isolated, pohara as, and it's getting worse. So you fellas are even more important than ever, as you know, and so he mihi nui ki koutou mahi a te mahi. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe matua. Richard, homai anō te whiki whaki e tiwi ki tēnei rangatira o tātou.